The criteria is no longer experience, competence. The criteria is fame. This isn't about merit. It's not about fairness. It's about what's the voter's first impression. I just believe, without regard to merit, that a sheriff named Bianco has the significant edge over a guy named Hilton with an English accent. I can't understand for the life of me why the Attorney General in California take the position, we don't want the public to see these ballots. And if you're confident there's nothing wrong, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of this and actually expedite it and oversee the whole thing and validate that these claims and concerns and worries aren't legitimate? Betty is by far the person in the race who knows the California bureaucracy, the California budget, better than all the rest of them combined. It isn't even close. What concerns me about my fellow Democrats right now is they appear to be resistant to any kind of transparency. Not a single registrar has developed any kind of a tracking mechanism that is a chain of evidence that would meet any kind of even rudimentary criminal standard as with respect to the admissibility of evidence in court.
All right, everybody, welcome back again. I think we got a good show today. We have Steve Peace here in the house. Reformers may know him as the guy who wrote California's top 2 nonpartisan primary. I know him as my father. We also got Ethan here, Kara, Sean. Let's jump right into it. I mean, we had another executive order coming out of the White House.
Got another executive order coming out of the White House. Trump is signing a new executive order on voting. All the experts are saying he lacks the authority to do this, but he basically escalated his efforts to reshape American elections.
Are these the COVID experts? They brought the COVID experts back?
That's right. They're going to create lists of United States citizens, Chad, who are eligible to vote in every single state. And then they're going to instruct the Postal Service to send mail ballots only to those verified voters.
Yeah.
Got democracy strong here in America.
What's Mr. Peace's view of this?
Well, I mean, it was once again, you can count on Washington to overdo everything. And the fortunate thing for California voters is, as I think we wrote about, I think Kara wrote about this a week or so ago, if you look at the proposals in D.C. that are associated with assuring that the voter files are legitimate, all of them suffer from overreach. And all of them can be legitimately criticized from the perspective of being concerned about discouraging people from vote or becoming barriers to access. Interestingly enough, though, in California, there'll be an initiative on the ballot in November that candidly looks like the ACLU wrote it, accomplishes all of the goals, or most of the goals, 99 and 9/10% of the goals, if you assume they are good government goals, of assurance that people who do vote are in fact eligible to vote without any reasonable argument suggesting that it'll keep people from the ballot. So in California, the argument and the folks who are concerned about these overreaches in D.C. that I would expect, I know this won't happen, but a reasonable environment, non-partisan, non-polarized environment, you would have Democrats having the great opportunity to step up and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't necessary. We don't need to even have the fight about its legality. It may or may not be legal. The court will determine that. But it's not necessary because we've got a template here in California to bring all the order and the assurance and the transparency and the accountability to a mail ballot process that you are looking for.
But doesn't the president just lack the constitutional authority to be messing in our elections? Isn't it in the Constitution, Chad? You're a lawyer. Isn't it state or time, manner, and place is determined by the states in the Constitution, right?
You're going to throw back to me. I mean, there's no doubt there's going to be issues of federalism. There's going to be issues of privacy. There's going to be a lot of those issues. But, okay, now let's step in the president's shoes. You say, okay, well, look, we got this dysfunction. I mean, he's partly to blame for how the overreach on the SAVE Act, but it's what he's doing is interesting, right? He's basically saying, let's take the federal information, the USPS, the Postal Service that sends the ballots, that's a federal agency, right? So if the state's using a federal agency to send the ballots to the home, that's the argument, right? They're saying they're not getting into the time, place, manner. They're saying, look, just like we can get involved and not be transporting drugs through the USPS system, we can't be involved in sending mail to people who are not citizens that shouldn't be voting.
You're exactly right. This is a very clever approach. Most of the precedent associated with federal intervention into criminal activity, and keep in mind, if a person theoretically is not eligible to vote, that's a crime. And we're all familiar with all of the prosecutions.
It's a federal crime.
It's a federal crime. And we are all familiar with federal prosecutions that are anchored by U.S. mails, okay? The big time organized criminal activity, mainstream businesses that get involved in bad activity. Often the first entry point for federal action and federal crimes is the use of the mail. So that's why I say, from a Democrat's perspective, this is a golden opportunity to preempt the risk that a Supreme Court, which will ultimately make this decision. It doesn't really matter what I think or what Chad thinks or any other lawyer on the planet thinks. What matters is, what does the Supreme Court ultimately say? And from my perspective, as one who is both concerned about, well, really three things as it relates to this. One is the actual effect of any of our policies, both intended and unintended. Second is the confidence that voters have in the process, which is shaken by the perception that there may be skullduggery going on. For example, I can't understand for the life of me why the Attorney General in California would jump into the Bianco situation, where Bianco seized a bunch of ballots in Riverside, and take the position, we don't want the public to see these ballots. We don't. If he wants to go in and supervise, surely the Attorney General has the ability to oversee the sheriff's investigation. And if you're confident there's nothing wrong, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of this and actually expedite it and oversee the whole thing and validate that these claims and concerns and worries aren't legitimate? It's just a strange instinct that, and I don't know whether it's rooted in just the hyper-partisanship where Joe says yes, so I have to say no, and nobody bothers to think about, well, maybe there's a position that says, okay, yes, I'm actually going to win if I say yes for a moment. Let's take a look at this. Transparency is seldom the wrong answer. And so in this case, Democrats have the opportunity to actually embrace a rationally written proposal, get themselves off of a political issue, which they, by everybody's polling, are on the wrong side of. But the alternative is going to be this. They're not going to do that.
No way.
Instead, they're going to run a campaign against the initiative that doesn't speak about the initiative, doesn't talk about the
It'll
issue.
be Prop 50 right all over again.
Correct.
It's going to be about Trump.
It's a Trump Republican plot.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't help their
prevail.
case when Trump is directing the Department of Homeland Security to make lists, to go into the Social Security Administration to make these lists.
I think
and then
one
to
of
put
my
the post office in charge of, be the gatekeeper of whether or not somebody is a citizen or not and should get a ballot. It's insane.
Yeah, I think a concern that I have is that gets brought up with something like this executive order is just how increasingly the courts are being relied on to settle election disputes on any matter. And that ends up bogging down the courts, and it drags these issues out up to the point of elections. You're seeing this in Missouri, where we still are having these legal fights over their new congressional maps and the veto referendum and whether signatures are going to count and all this. And this is just getting dragged out. It's creating chaos and confusion in the whole process. Well,
be careful, though, because that actually makes the argument against mail-in ballots. Because if we, for example, instead went to the opposite extreme and said, we're going to have a national holiday one day or 2 days, 3 days, say 3 consecutive days, right? And you could go Saturday through
Tuesday. We have Tuesday election day anyway.
Whatever it may be. And everybody gets the work day off. And if you vote, you go back to work and you have your I voted little sticker. You have a free paid day off, right? There's all kinds of good government arguments. And that would solve more of the questions about litigation than any other single act. But we've become so rooted in the assumption that the access provided to mail-in ballots what we used to call absentee ballots that used to be what Republicans loved and Democrats hated.
True. That's
Well,
so true.
well, if I can jump in here about an overreach, because okay, I'm going to pick a little bones with my buddy Ethan over here. Is look, you have all these things. It's like, okay, we have mail-in ballot voting. Okay, and then it's like, okay, well then let's extend the time period that people can receive the ballots. My mere suggestion on the show that okay, people have a month to send in a ballot. Right? They have an entire month of a ballot sent to them. In California, it's pre-postage, right? And what we're bickering about and the Supreme Court's deciding about is whether that person can wait all 30 days and then put it in the post office and have something. And Ethan over here goes and hyperbolizes and suggests that I'm saying that people are lazy for using mail-in ballot voting. That's not what I'm saying.
Let's okay. I understand your concern. Let's go back to the way I phrased the question. I think usually we put a question in the caption, and in the video you're talking about, well, why don't people understand that democracy requires work anymore? Like, democracy still requires work. There's still efforts we need to make. We used to go out to the ballot box, wait in line, all this stuff. And so you're talking about how mail-in voting, people that don't send it in until the very last day are lazy. Like, why haven't they taken the time in the last 30 days? Why haven't this happened? So I feel like the natural question that was posed from that is, has the effect of mail-in voting being allowed for Americans made the voters more likely to wait until that last day? Therefore being lazy, right? So that was the point of my question.
That's a little put out of context, though.
Oh,
Our question was specifically, you made it sound like I was talking about mail-in balloting altogether, which, look, I would be a hypocrite because I utilize mail-in ballot voting.
Well, so does the President of the United States. In the ultimate act of irony, he voted by absentee ballot in this most recent election in Florida,
guys,
and he was in Florida.
Everything you're talking about isn't even remotely close to the important thing about happening. You're looking at the wrong end of the siphon.
Tell us what the right end is then.
Here's the real world problem with mail-in, with universal mail-in ballots. It extends the period of the election. It dramatically increases election costs. Because it used to be that we knew what election day was, so you focused your spending on election day. In defense of that voter who's waiting until the last day, I want to see everything those candidates are willing to say.
A lot of them drop out too, right? There's scandals.
Well, if you want to do that, then drop your mail into any box on election day. Don't put it in the mail.
I totally agree with you.
No problem.
Finally,
but because once again we've Trumpized this conversation, and all the way from when discussing the executive order to this, we've obliterated any rational discussion about, are mail-in ballots really a good thing for expanding the participation? Are they really a good thing for maintaining or what the impact on cost of elections are? Do we know more about candidates, less about candidates? I think in the end, we're going to learn. We're going to find whether we may go to electronic voting. We may vote at ATM machines. There may be all kinds of solutions that are far better than mail-in ballots that increase voter participation, do not decrease them. Look, when you defocus the campaign activity, you ultimately, over time, as people become acclimated to the process, you actually reduce self-motivated voter participation. And so that's why ballot harvesting, which is what the Republicans are really bent out of shape over, because in some states like California, ballot harvesting is legal. In most states, ballot harvesting is illegal.
Most countries, it's illegal.
Correct. And
it
so
should probably be illegal.
There's no question it should be. Illegal.
I mean,
there's absolutely no question.
It's really a perversion of the process. There are things wrong. We're not saying that we have a perfect system, Steve.
Well, and look, there are defects in the. And I want to speak about it philosophically. I don't really care whether I care, but regardless of whether you believe there is fraud in terms of voting or you don't believe there is fraud, anything you do to go in and get the right answer, whichever way that answer is a good thing. What concerns me about my fellow Democrats right now is they appear to be resistant to any kind of transparency. Let me give you a specific example. In California, each individual registrar of voters still has despite the legislation that allowed more aggressive use of mail ballots and ballot harvesting as well, they still have the underlying statutory obligation to assure that the ballot is in fact legitimate. But not a single registrar has developed any kind of a tracking mechanism that is a chain of evidence that would meet any kind of even rudimentary criminal standard as with respect to the admissibility of evidence in court.
That's
Once
a problem,
those ballot,
right?
it is
That
a
is a
gigantic
problem.
And once those envelopes are separated from the ballot, it's almost no way to know about the legitimacy of its orientation.
Wow.
And even the Trump solution is defective because they're visiting all of their information that they're embedding in this thing in the envelope, not in the ballot.
Right.
Now,
Which,
Yeah.
So, and you really can't fix that because you got to protect the
secrecy.
secret ballot. So, look, I think in the end, people who really care about voters and minority voters in particular, and voters who have a lower inclination to go to the polls,
Or maybe seniors who have a harder time.
Disabled.
I'm going the opposite direction you think I'm going. I think the good government turnout, wanting higher turnout, higher voter participation folks are ultimately going to find themselves in the opposite space where they think they are right now. The way to get more people voting and to wipe out all of this silliness is a combination of the future and the past. The past in the context of bringing back election day or a short component of election days, no more than 3, and the future in terms of bringing technology so that you don't have to go to a polling booth to effectuate that. You can do it. Again, we could adapt some bank ATM machines for 3 days to accept ballots. We could allow balloting through our phones.
Yeah.
With
Well, you can use blockchain to verify, and
you
Blockchain.
you have a much more secure system voting through your phone than you do by mailing. Just ask the IRS in terms of how much cheating goes on in stealing Social Security checks. They're stolen out of mailboxes. The risk isn't in that phone. So it's back to the future and go to the future. Let's bring the technology that allows us to verify and make more transparent the process. But let's also recognize it's called Election Day for a reason. Let me give you a really interesting example that's contemporary, just happened yesterday. Very strange decision, not by Congressman Swalwell, I suspect, or by Congressman Swalwell's political advisors. I think this is a classic example of lawyers run amok. The lawyers representing Congressman Swalwell just filed in writing a cease and desist order demanding that the FBI not release the old 10-year-old investigative files dealing with the so-called Fang Fang spy scandal years ago.
Now, and we're talking about Eric Swalwell, who's a candidate for governor. He's also a congressman, and he was, I think, kicked off of the Intelligence Committee several years ago because of this relationship with a Chinese spy called Fang Fang.
Right, but I don't want to talk about the governor's race in this context.
Okay.
I want to talk about the specific decision that lawyers made. And I'm emphasizing lawyers because I think any of us with any political experience know that if they did consult his political consultants, then they all should be fired. Okay? Because think about what these lawyers just did to their client. They filed a document with the FBI saying, do not release information on the investigation of my client. Now, that might be in the context of lawyers, very good lawyering, because they may be right in terms of the inappropriateness. And not only did they make that, and all of us around politics know that is probably a death blow in the context of how do you defend publicly, particularly in a post-Epstein environment where we've, demanded all these materials. How do you defend as a politician? the notion that you don't want the investigation to be
Yeah,
public.
I see that.
So,
I see that,
okay,
especially
so,
like in the
but
this post Epstein
but
environment.
here's
But
here's
I do know why they did it, though,
but
Steve.
really.
Why
I mean,
did they
I
do
think
it?
I know. Like, I can see as a political person why they would do this. They're trying to increase his profile as the person
Oh,
who took on
that
Trump,
may
right? They're
be.
trying to get
Yeah,
his
they
name
could.
in, keep his name
I
in
got
the
that.
press,
I got that. But
right?
okay, that's interesting. That's just very fascinating because I'm so old, having lived through the era where we actually had campaigns of persuasion. I keep forgetting that there is this sort of underlying notion that it's not about the issues anymore. It's not about politics. It's just about being a meme. I'm a bigger anti-Trump guy than this or the other guy is. So
Right,
and
right.
that if that's the case, that's the other thing. But that's not even the most important point of this. Here's the really amazing thing. The core argument they make is citing the policy of the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Justice Department not to publish any information 60 days before an election.
Oh,
Right?
exactly. Right. So 60 days before an election, you're not supposed to.
Correct.
The FBI is not supposed to mess with things. Remember when James Comey? Remember?
Totally.
In
But
2016?
Kara, what's the date? What is today's date?
Today's date is it's April 1st. It's April Fool's Day.
Okay. What is the date of the election?
June 2nd.
Are we 60 days out?
Yeah, we are. Right?
Okay. According to the Justice Department and according to Donald Trump, we're 60 days out.
So they're not supposed to do it anyway, is what you're saying?
No. We're further than 60 days out right now.
Mm-hmm.
But in the lawyers, again, classic stupid lawyers, the lawyers argued in writing in their filing in a, quote, cease and desist letter to the FBI that the starting date of the election is the first date that the ballots were mailed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now let's think about that. What does that mean? Forget the Swalwell. I didn't bring this up to talk about Swalwell.
No, he's my crush.
This is what happens. This is what happens when narrowly focused folk, whether they're lawyers or bureaucrats making regulations, think very narrowly about the issue right in front of them. Okay? The notion that the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's Office could not take any action 60 days before, which is a policy, not a law. Okay, but if that policy were to be backed up so that it doesn't begin, so that it begins before the first thing is mailed, you're now eliminating half of the year of every election year.
Right.
It's the greatest politician protection proposal in the history. Right?
Yeah. I see that.
It's absurd.
Let's get more into the California governor's race with you, Steve. We're happy to have you here. I think like pretty much all of the candidates who are running for governor. We're sort of curious, is there anything that you think is especially notable, laudable, less so about any of these guys?
When you're looking at polls, remember what's important isn't what those top lines are right now. What's important is who are the undecideds.
Yeah.
So even in the polls that show two Republicans at the top, the undecideds, the Republicans are gone. There's no more universe, unless you believe that 17%, which is really in the lead, 17 to 20% who are undecided. They're all Democrats and independents. There's virtually no Republican decided.
Let's just break that down. Let's drill down on that.
Yeah.
Steve, what you're saying is that even though there are maybe two Republicans in the top 10 of all of these people running, or maybe they're in the top 2 or 3, that the undecided is so huge right now that there's probably no way that two Republicans are going to wind up the top 2 when this is all said and done.
Let me put it real bluntly.
Okay.
The top 2 system is designed to run candidates, not people from political parties, first of all. So if we get 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and remember, it wasn't that long ago that Adam Schiff was running a campaign trying to engineer a Republican as opponent and succeeded. And Republicans have done it as well. And we can talk later about that, the solution to that, which is top 4. But in the context of this election, even though there are multiple Democratic candidates, statistically, from a a pure analytical perspective, there's a higher likelihood there'll be 2 Democrats than 2 Republicans. You might say, well, how is that possible? You only got to get to 20% to be for sure in this race, assuming there's not some massive change as a result of somebody dropping out and some consolidation. And Democrats are 40%, the electorate. Republicans are, what, 20?
So it's a little less than a
like
quarter
23.
at this
Right,
point.
23.
Right. And the NPPs are the 30%. Okay. Republicans are in third place. And both of these candidates are running campaigns that are appealing to the base. So look, we all know why there are certain elements in the Democratic Party. Every time we get around to this cycle, there's this hysteria narrative. But look, that is a reflection of different issues in terms of why isn't there candidates or other appeal. And look, I don't blame the Democrats for that. I don't blame the Republicans for it. The reality of the society, how we share information, the impact of the internet and such has just changed things so dramatically. I think the political class is still adjusting. The consultants candidly don't know what they're doing other than raising a lot of money and making a lot of money. So let's get back to the candidates.
Okay. So do you know Katie Porter? She seems like she's doing pretty well in these polls.
I don't. That's one I probably know the least. I know only from her public involvement, and she's probably hit that stasis point where at a minimum she's not going to go any lower, and she could actually be the big beneficiary of the heavily funded candidates going after each other.
What about Eric Swalwell?
Well, I know Eric. Eric was the first beneficiary of open primary. He ran against a guy named Pete Stark. Eric was the moderate running against the progressive, and it was a Democrat on Democrat general election.
Very interesting.
Sort of an interesting historical fact.
What about Javier Becerra, Steve?
I served with Javier in the legislature. He is studious, intelligent, more of a policy guy as opposed to a political guy. Sometimes, some of the folks in the political space, I'll even get a little irritated about sort of studiousness. He's the smart kid in the class that is both respected and resented.
What about Betty Yee? She's the other female candidate in the race besides Porter.
Betty is. I not only know Betty well. Betty used to work for me when I was chairman of the budget committee, and I worked with her. When she became a member of the Board of Equalization, I was director of finance. Betty is by far the person in the race who knows the California bureaucracy, the California budget, better than all the rest of them combined. It isn't even close.
So if Betty Yee were to not win, say, is she somebody who they would try to bring in to help them manage
No question.
Yeah. So that's
Betty is respected, former staff person, and in the budget process really knows the mechanics very well.
And then we have like a couple of Republicans, starting with Chad Bianco, who's the Riverside County Sheriff. He's been in the news lately for seizing ballots. Do you know him?
I don't. Bianco, I think is, however the polling goes at one moment or the next, is always a few points better than it appears when you look at it one-on-one to Hilton, simply because I think people are really underestimating the degree to which Hilton's is fairly unfairly cabined by being in a state that is plurality Latino and being the guy with the English accent.
You're talking about Steve Hilton now.
Steve Hilton, right? That I just looking at the Bianco Hilton dynamic of which one comes out of that element, and I just think that a sheriff that is Latino, in the end, in the California electorate, despite the clear money and whatnot that's behind the Hilton campaign, probably gets a few more points at the ballot box that doesn't show up in the polling.
Yeah, Hilton's parents fled Hungary, fled communism in Hungary to start a new life in England. And then he just moved to California starting in 2012. And he's just been a citizen since, I think, 2021, Steve Hilton. I think we've all met him, right? Right, Chad? You've met him before, haven't you?
I met him years ago. He was, he's been somebody that I think authentically has been frustrated with the system for a while, and does understand how things really work. Right, his years with Cameron out in England. Right now, it's a question of whether governor of California is the logical next role for him, but. I do think he's genuine.
But don't you think his enthusiasm for President Trump will hurt him in California? And probably the same question about Bianco. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean, all the Republicans are at this point. You never know; things can change in short time between now and election. But right now, you have to assume that's another. But I just think it's more fundamental. Voters don't know any of the layers of information about these folks that you and we're speaking about now. First impression is important. Part of the reason why Hilton, Swalwell, Steyer, Bianco all have numbers up ahead of the rest Porter is they had a social media presence for one reason or another. They're a known quantity. It's more a function of name ID, superstar status, so to speak, than it is about political acumen, governance, whatnot. It doesn't mean they're not capable, but they're always going to outperform in the front end of a campaign. And the question is, it gives them an advantage, but can they take it to the next era? I just find it difficult to believe. This isn't about merit. It's not about fairness. It's about what's the voter's first impression in that pool of voters in California if you assume that at least one Republican's going to get out. I just believe, without regard to merit, that a sheriff named Bianco has the significant
better
edge
shot of
over
getting
a guy
in.
named Hilton with an English accent.
Yeah. Yeah. And, he's in the national news now, Chad Bianco, for seizing these 650,000 ballots. And so, and I guess the only person that we didn't mention is sort of the new entrant, Matt Mahan. Am I pronouncing that right?
I don't know Mahan. So far,
he's the mayor of San Jose.
So he's raised a lot of money.
Okay.
And
a lot of big, important backers.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, I think he's really an unwritten book at this point.
What about Antonio Villaraigosa? He's sort of like a legend in California, but he hasn't quite caught fire yet, according to these most recent polls.
Antonio has the most breadth of experience of all of the candidates. He's been mayor, been the leader of the lower house of the assembly. And in his earlier life as a young person, he was an activist. He was involved in the anti-Prop 187 campaign. And, it's an interesting arc of learning the process from activist to governing. He is certainly qualified for the job. And he's had his ups and downs in his life, like all of us have. And he has that whole life experience and sort of thing. But he hasn't broken out as this whole bottom tier. And I just think it's interesting to look at the tier of candidates who are sort of in the next group. They're all the people, Becerra, Antonio, Betty. These are the people who are actually experienced. These are the actual, on objective, unbiased distance criteria.
That they would be the ones who maybe are really ready to become governor.
Right.
On day one, as opposed to some of these other people who don't even necessarily have executive experience, like Swalwell or Porter.
Correct. And that's not knocking them, and they might actually turn out to be better governors, right? But it's the life in the world we now live in. The criteria is no longer experience, competence, right? The criteria is fame.
Yeah. All right, moving right along, I would love to talk about what's going on in Arizona with you, Sean. It looks like No Labels, like there's this offshoot of No Labels that's kind of gone rogue. Tell me about what's going on in Arizona.
Well, yeah, so a judge recently ruled that the No Labels Party essentially committed a political bait and switch by having the Secretary of State change its name to the Arizona Independent Party in December of last year. And so the Democratic and the Republican parties, both sued. There is a Clean Elections Commission that also sued regarding this as well, saying that it would lead to voter confusion. And you can debate about whether or not the major parties actually care about voter confusion. However, there is a nuance to it, and we know it from our coverage in IVN that there is some evidence to back that up. That if you name a party, say the Arizona Independent Party or the American Independent Party, like in California, that it can lead to voter confusion, particularly in systems, say in a system in which the parties can dictate who can participate in primaries. That ultimately leads to voter confusion and leads to disenfranchisement because those voters can't participate when they thought they could participate. So, yeah, it's basically a judge said, yeah, the Secretary of State couldn't do this, so they have to go back to being a no labels party.
And I think that's funny because, or odd, just because they have to go back to being the no labels party. But these no labels people in Arizona, if I understand correctly, actually have no relationship to the real no labels in Washington D.C. That's run by our friend Nancy Jacobson and Margaret White and Liz. Those guys have nothing to do with the no labels people in Arizona. So no labels, ironically, has had their label
No labels
stolen.
stole the label from no labels.
Yeah.
They labeled themselves no labels. They didn't have the rights to the labels.
We
What
also
else?
have
We got a few more quick hits to go.
Yeah, we have
I
ranked
think-
choice voting. Open primaries might be coming to another major city in New York. Is that right?
Yeah, so the group Unite NY recently presented to the Buffalo Charter Revision Commission, much like the New York has a Charter Revision Commission, much like Los Angeles has a Charter Review Commission, in terms of passing reforms like ranked choice voting and better ballot access for the city. I had a chance to talk to Anthony Thomas with the Unite NY this week, who, he gave that presentation, and that organization is reaching out to communities where they see a need for a particular reform, and they approach that community and try to get it passed there. So that's what's happening there.
Quick shout out to this. I wrote an article this week on Paige Cognetti, who's running for Congress out in Pennsylvania. And she is a huge proponent of open primaries, even though she's a Democrat. And the reason why is because when she first ran for mayor in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the party decided that they were going to choose a nominee based on a closed caucus. And so she dropped out of the Democratic Party and decided to run in that election as an independent. And she ended up winning. So we've got a scrappy mayor of Scranton, Pennsylvania, running for Congress now as a Democrat, but she's definitely got some anti-establishment bona fides as far as I'm concerned. Have you guys heard of her?
Through you.
Just through me.
I liked your article title, Page Against the Machine. That was very creative, very creative.
That's her slogan, based on the Zach De La Rocha band, The Rage Against the Machine. And so, I think we need more.
I know those guys too. They're from Sacramento.
Ah, there we go.
I thought, well, Zach's from Irvine. I feel like he went to my high school, Zach De La Rocha, or went to my sister's high school maybe. And I feel like my sister has this story where he asked her out and she said, I would never, I don't want to go out with him. And I thought, like, boy, my sister could have wound up married to a really genuine rock star. But
oh yeah,
oh my God, that's so funny. That's your mother, Ethan. I'm just putting it all together right now.
Yeah,
Your mom, Zach De La Rocha had a crush on your mom from Rage Against the Machine. It's
wow,
a true story.
Well,
story.
I haven't felt the rock star genes yet, so I don't think anything ended up happening.
All politics. All politics, very personal.
Two members of Rage the Machine actually were staffers in Sacramento.
That's so cool.
Wow.
You gotta love when politics and rock and roll mix,
and
right?
I think, exactly, totally. But one thing we have to bring up is, did anyone see what happened with Kristi Noem's husband? It just came out yesterday. It was some pretty shocking images that we saw coming out of Daily Mail there. Like you're saying, it's all about fame, and it seems like even our politicians now are just, they're front page of the tabloids, right?
Well, I mean, I was thinking like Kristi Noem, there's all these pictures of her dressing up, right? She dresses up as a cowboy and she goes on a horse, or she dresses up, to make points. And so now it turns out, I guess her husband also dresses up.
Well,
Yikes.
so I've been reading some things about how, so someone leaked to the Daily Mail that Stephen Miller was encouraging ICE to act violently, and so conveniently after that,
Wait, is that true?
This is things I'm just reading, right?
Okay.
Reading, and so whether or not they have any truth or validity, I would have to look further into that. But but you know how it works in politics, right? Like if it's not beyond the realm of possibility that certain information gets leaked that makes certain people look bad, and so they come out with these photos and images of like Kristi Noem's husband. It's a very weird story for sure. But
and I know my take is it's bizarre and it's also sad. You have a real family, you have a spouse who there's no accusation that she was even aware of it, and you have kids involved, and it's like now it's become this national embarrassment. It's not about the husband and the whatever, how weird it may be, right? It's, you have a real family that is good. It's lots of pain's going to happen right now. And really, what does that have to do with the national political discussion and improving our stuff? Daily Mail is going to get a lot of clicks, a lot of attention, but these are the types of things that probably should be dealt on a familial level, but unfortunately have infected our national politics.
It's so interesting that you would say that, because there was a story just in Maine this week. One of the people who's running for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District, his name is Matt Dunlop, and he did a social media stand-up in front of Paul LePage's house. And so he's standing there talking about how, does Paul LePage really live in Maine, or does he actually live in Florida? And somebody pointed out on the internet, like, what is going on? Like, why are you standing in front of this man's house? Why are you putting that, out into the world? Like, do they not deserve any privacy? Like, we have people who are, politicians, like the poor woman in Minnesota, Melissa Hortman, who was killed at her house. Like, we should not have politicians standing in front of people's houses right now. Like, that's not the environment.
I think it's the Nick Shirley style of reporting, where you just go there, make a video in front of it, and that means it's true because there's a face and there's a real piece of evidence that you're pointing to, and that's just kind of propagated throughout whoever's telling him to make these videos. That's what they're like. The best thing would be to be in front of his house, right? And
it's this media environment where you have where it's to be the first to report on it, but also B, like, oh, we could come out with this thing that's exclusive, right? To Chad's point, it's clickbait, and if you have an opportunity to have that clickbait or that view bait, then you have a lot of media outlets.
It's hard not to resist to want to watch that story, right? So
I mean, we're talking about
it's difficult, but.
Yeah.
We're running up on time here. We had a very, I guess, unique, interesting show today for those of our viewers and listeners, or many listeners, addressing a couple people that sent emails back to us on the last newsletter is like, typical. Yeah. Oh, you guys are just a bunch of Democrats.
And I think I got to clarify, guys. Chad did not say that mail-in voting makes Americans lazy, okay? He did not say that.
Thank you.
Clearing it up for the record. This is all, it's a fabrication. It's sensationalism.
That's right.
But maybe you're watching here today
start
because
calling
of
him Daily Mail Ethan.
when someone replied to our newsletter calling us a Democrat version of the Working Families Party, I thought that's a new one.
That's a new one. Not heard that one. We hadn't heard that one, but interesting. We just republished. We hadn't done it in a long time. Who we are, and it literally starts off. Some people call us Democrats, Republicans, undercover communists. Like, depends on which article you read or which thing you saw, right? And in what context you saw it. So, that's why we love our viewers that stay back and come back and really understand who we are, that we bring on all kinds of different voices. We bring people like my father, who's, was in the legislature for a long time. We got Ethan, Kara on the East Coast. We bring in conservatives, Republicans, and the whole point of our show is just have a discussion. Stop assigning evil motives to somebody who disagrees with you, right? And that's the best way to start having a better discourse. And then, let's look at our election laws and how they've incentivized this crazy division in the country.
And then hopefully one of the things we're going to do is we really need to start telling our viewers, like, here's what you can do. Like, here's something specific. So we have a lot of gripes, right? We talk about a lot of gripes in the show, but like, I also think that we have solutions to some of the problems that we're seeing, and we need to start talking about those with people so that they can kind of start owning how to make this all better.
Exactly. And the first thing they can do is actually like this video, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on all of our social platforms. That's right, guys.
All right.
And we accept contributions.
And we accept contributions as well. So thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLOS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olosmedia.com.
OLOS Media.